The sky lit up with explosions. Kravax gripped her command chair as the ship rocked violently. Warning alarms blared across the bridge of the Void Talon, her flagship vessel. Screens flickered, showing the devastating toll of the human attack. "Shields. Failing, Commander," called her second-in-command. "We've lost engines 3 and 4. Kravax narrowed her golden eyes, four-fingered hands tightening on the armrests. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. The humans were prey, not predators. Yet here they were, outmaneuvering the finest fleet the Zithari Empire had to offer. "Divert all power to forward shields," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Prepare for counterattack pattern Delta." Another blast rocked the ship. A console exploded, sending a junior officer flying across the bridge. The acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. "Impossible," Kravax muttered as she studied the tactical display. The human ships moved in perfect formation, anticipating her every move. She had never seen such coordination from them before. On the main view screen, the human fleet advanced through the debris field at Proxima Ridge. Their formation was led by a sleek vessel that moved with surprising agility for its size. The USS Horizon. She had heard of its commander, a human named Eric Summers. Intelligence reports described him as clever but inexperienced. Those reports were clearly wrong. "Commander, we've lost weapons control." The panic in her weapons officer's voice was unmistakable, an emotion no Zithari warrior should display in battle. Kravax stood, her tall, slender frame towering over her bridge crew. Her scaled skin reflected the red emergency lights. "Launch all remaining fighters. Target the horizon. We will not fall without taking their leader with us." But even as she gave the order, another volley struck the Void Talon. The ship lurched sideways, artificial gravity failing momentarily. Kravax was thrown against a railing, pain shooting through her side. Fighters can't launch, Commander. Bays are damaged." Blood trickled from a cut on Kravax's brow ridge as she pulled herself up. The situation was clear now. There would be no glorious victory today. No songs of triumph would be sung about this battle. "Open a channel to all ships," she commanded. Her voice remained calm, though inside she felt the cold grip of fear, not of death but of failure. "Channel open. All vessels, this is Commander Kravax. Implement scatter protocol. Return to home systems independently." She paused, swallowing her pride. The day is lost. Live to fight another day. Her officers stared at her in shock. Retreat was rarely ordered in the Zithari military. It was considered almost as shameful as surrender. "Commander," her communications officer spoke hesitantly, "we're being hailed by the human vessel." Kravax straightened her spine. Even in defeat, she would show these humans the dignity of a Zithari warrior. On screen, the face that appeared belonged to a human male with short brown hair and determined eyes. "Captain Eric Summers of the USS Horizon." "Commander Kravax," he said, his translator converting his words to the harsh consonants of Zithari speech. "Your ship is disabled. Your fleet is in retreat. Surrender your vessel and I guarantee the safety of your crew." Kravax met his gaze steadily. "And if I refuse? Then we finish this and no one aboard your ship survives." His expression showed no pleasure in the statement, merely resolve. Another explosion rocked the bridge. Life support warnings flashed across multiple screens. "Commander, we're losing hull integrity," her engineer reported. "We have wounded throughout the ship." Kravax closed her eyes briefly. The Zithari code was clear. Victory or death. But to sacrifice her entire crew in a hopeless last stand would serve no purpose except pride. "Very well, Captain Summers," she said finally. "I surrender my vessel." As she spoke those words, Kravax knew her fate was sealed. In the eyes of the Empire, she was already dead. Failure meant execution. That was the way of her people. The human ships closed in around the crippled Void Talon. Kravax stood tall, waiting for the boarding parties. She had lost the battle, but she would face what came next with honor. The air in the interrogation room was cold. Kravax sat with perfect posture despite the restraints on her wrists. Her purple-tinted scales gleamed under the harsh lights of the USS Horizon. Across from her, Captain Eric Summers studied a datapad, occasionally glancing up at his prisoner. Your defensive formations at Proxima Ridge were unlike anything we've seen before, Eric said finally. Why change tactics now? Kravax remained silent, her four-fingered hands resting still on the metal table. The wound on her brow ridge had been treated by the human medics, much to her surprise. Eric leaned forward. Look, I know the Zithari code. You think staying quiet somehow preserves your honor, but your ship is captured. Your crew is in our brig. The battle is over. Then why am I here, human? Kravax asked, her voice deep and resonant. If the battle is truly over, my fate is sealed. Eric stood and paced the small room. Because I need to understand your fleet movements. There's something bigger happening, isn't there? The Empire doesn't commit a commander of your rank to a skirmish at Proxima Ridge without reason. For a moment, Kravax saw a flash of memory. Her mate killed 3 years ago when humans first pushed back against Zithari expansion. The same determination had been in his eyes before his ship exploded. These humans were stubborn creatures. You would not understand our reasons, Captain, she said. Your species thinks only of individual survival. You cannot grasp the glory of the Empire. Eric's jaw tightened. He pressed a button on the wall, and an image appeared. A burning colony on New Terra. Bodies scattered across fields of ash. This was my home, he said quietly. 2 years ago. Your Empire's warriors left no survivors except those who happened to be off-world. My wife and daughter were there. Kravax looked at the image without flinching. War brings death, Captain Summers. Your people chose to resist. Eric slammed his hand on the table. We were peaceful colonists. There was no military presence on New Terra. Yet here you are, commanding a warship, Kravax observed. Perhaps we are not so different. The comment caught Eric off guard. He studied the alien commander with new eyes. Despite being the enemy, there was something he respected about her composure. You fought well today, he admitted. Your tactics were solid. We just happened to anticipate them. A compliment from my captor, Kravax said with a slight tilt of her head. Unexpected. A faint smile touched Eric's lips. I've studied your previous engagements. You're considered one of the Empire's finest tacticians. That's why your defeat today will be seen as such a failure by your people. Kravax's golden eyes narrowed slightly, the first sign of emotion she had shown. You know of our ways? I know enough, Eric replied. I know what happens to Zithari commanders who fail in battle. A silence fell between them. The hum of the ship's engines filled the void. If you know this, Kravax said finally, then you understand I have nothing to gain by answering your questions. My honor is all I have left. Eric sat back down. What if I told you there might be another way? A way that doesn't end with your execution when we eventually exchange prisoners? Kravax studied him carefully. There is no other way in the Empire. Failure means death. That is our strength and our burden. Maybe for most, Eric said. But you're not most Zithari, are you, Commander? You adapted your tactics. You tried new approaches. That suggests a mind that sees beyond rigid tradition. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Kravax's face. This human captain was more perceptive than she had anticipated. Think about it, Eric said, rising from his chair. I'll return tomorrow. Perhaps by then you'll see that honor can take many forms. As he left the room, Kravax watched him go. In another life, under different stars, she might have considered this human a worthy opponent. Perhaps even someone she could respect. The door sealed, leaving her alone with thoughts more troubling than any battle plan. 3 days passed aboard the USS Horizon. Kravax spent them in the small cell they had given her, performing her meditation rituals despite the confined space. She moved through the ancient warrior forms, her body flowing from one stance to another, finding calm in discipline. The door slid open. Eric entered, his face more serious than during their previous talks. We've received a transmission, he said without greeting. A Zithari cruiser is approaching under diplomatic banner. They want to negotiate prisoner exchanges. Kravax stopped, mid-movement. Her scales seemed to lose some of their luster. So soon? She asked. The Empire rarely bothers with prisoner recovery. They specifically asked for you by name. Kravax turned away, moving to the small viewport that showed the stars outside. Then my replacement has already been chosen. They come not to recover me, but to execute me and install a new commander. Eric leaned against the wall, watching her. Is that really how it works? No trial? No chance to explain the circumstances? Circumstances are irrelevant, Captain. Results are what matter to the Empire. Her voice remained steady, but her four-fingered hands clenched slightly. Failure is weakness. Weakness must be purged. That's insane, Eric said. You're one of their best commanders. I've seen the records of your victories. Kravax turned to face him. 27 successful campaigns, 14 worlds brought into the Empire, 3 major human fleets destroyed. She paused. And now one defeat. In the eyes of the Empire, that one failure erases all past glory. Eric shook his head. I could speak with their delegation. Explain how we had intelligence on your tactics, how the odds were. No. Kravax interrupted sharply. That would only bring greater shame. To have a human defend my failure would make my disgrace complete. A silence fell between them. Outside, the ship's alert system pinged softly. There's more, Eric said finally. Our intelligence division intercepted communications suggesting the Empire is planning a major offensive. The largest we've seen yet. Kravax showed no surprise. The Crimson Tide. It has been in preparation for over a year. You know about it? I helped plan it, she said simply. Before I was sent to secure Proxima Ridge. Eric stepped closer. How many ships? What targets? Kravax met his gaze steadily. Why would I tell you this? My death is certain, but I will not compound failure with treason. Because thousands of innocent lives are at stake, Eric argued. Colonies with children, families, people who have nothing to do with this war. War does not spare the innocent, Kravax replied. Your people should have considered this before expanding into Empire territory. Eric ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Those worlds were unclaimed when we settled them. Your empire just keeps pushing its borders outward, consuming everything in its path. Such is the way of the strong, Kravax said, though something in her tone suggested less conviction than her words implied. The ship's communication system activated. Captain Summers to the bridge. The Zithari vessel is within hailing range. Eric straightened his uniform. I have to go, but this conversation isn't over. As he reached the door, Kravax spoke again. Captain, when they come for me, I would prefer to face my end with dignity. Eric paused, looking back at her. For a moment, he saw not an alien enemy, but a soldier facing death with courage. I'll make sure of it, he promised. After he left, Kravax returned to her meditation pose. She had always known her life would end in service to the Empire. She had just never imagined it would be like this, defeated, captured, and soon to be executed as an example to others. Yet as she closed her eyes, it was not the Empire she thought of, but the curious human captain who seemed so troubled by her fate. The Zithari delegation arrived with cold efficiency. 2 warriors and a high arbiter named Sekfor boarded the USS Horizon. Their armor gleamed like polished obsidian against their purple-gray scales. Eric met them in the ship's conference room with Lieutenant Haley Jones and Security Chief Alan West at his side. We come for Commander Kravax, the arbiter stated without preamble. Her presence is required for the judgment ceremony. Eric kept his expression neutral. We're prepared to discuss a full prisoner exchange. You have 17 of our people from the Arcturus outpost. The arbiter's vertical pupils narrowed. The other prisoners are negotiable. Kravax is not. Her return is mandatory. Before we proceed, Eric said carefully, I want assurances about her treatment. She fought honorably. A harsh sound emerged from the arbiter, something like laughter. Honor? There is no honor in defeat, Captain. Surely even humans understand this simple concept. Lieutenant Jones shifted uncomfortably beside Eric. They had discussed this moment earlier. She had argued that Kravax's fate was not their concern. The commander was an enemy combatant responsible for thousands of human deaths. I'd like to speak with Commander Kravax before finalizing arrangements, Eric said. The arbiter made a dismissive gesture. Speak to her if you wish. It changes nothing. 20 minutes later, Eric entered Kravax's cell. She stood at attention, already aware of her people's arrival. They're here, Eric said simply. Kravax nodded. The arbiter Sekfor? Yes. You know him? He has overseen many judgment ceremonies. Her voice remained steady. He is thorough in his work. Eric paced the small room. I have a proposal for you. Kravax tilted her head slightly. A proposal? Help us understand the Crimson Tide offensive. Give us the information we need to prepare. In exchange, I'll grant you asylum aboard this ship. You don't have to go back with them. Surprise flashed in Kravax's golden eyes. You would defy the exchange agreement? I can claim we need you for further intelligence gathering. It would strain relations, but they couldn't force the issue without starting a direct confrontation. Kravax studied him closely. Why would you do this for an enemy? Eric stopped pacing. Because I've come to respect you, Commander. And because the information you have could save countless lives on both sides. By betraying my people, I would save them. She shook her head. Your logic is flawed, Captain. Is it? Is sending thousands of warriors to die in an offensive that might fail really the best for your people? Kravax moved closer to him. You do not understand the Zithari way. If I betray the Empire, I lose everything that makes me who I am. My honor, my place, my very identity. Even if it means your death? Especially then, she replied. A Zithari who fears death enough to betray their people is no Zithari at all. Eric felt frustration rising within him. There must be something in your culture, some precedent that allows for... There is not, she interrupted firmly. I appreciate what you are trying to do, Captain Summers. It is unexpected, but I cannot accept. They stood in silence. Two warriors from different worlds, separated by a gulf of culture and belief that seemed impossible to bridge. Then I will respect your decision, Eric finally said. But I won't stop looking for another solution. Kravax placed her hand on her chest in a formal salute. In another life you would have made a worthy Zithari, Eric Summers. As Eric left the cell, his mind raced. The exchange was scheduled for 6 hours from now. Somehow, in that time, he needed to find a way to save an enemy who refused to be saved, before she faced execution for a failure that was, in many ways, due to his own success. Eric sat alone in his quarters, surrounded by datapads displaying Zithari cultural texts. For the past 3 hours, he had been searching for anything that might help Kravax. The exchange would happen in less than 3 hours. There has to be something, he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. His door chimed. Lieutenant Haley Jones entered, carrying a fresh cup of coffee. You should get some rest, Captain, she said, placing the cup beside him. The exchange will be tense enough without you being exhausted. Eric took a grateful sip. I can't let them execute her, Haley. Jones sighed. Sir, with all due respect, she's killed thousands of our people. The Zithari don't take prisoners. They execute them. Why are we treating her differently? Because we're not them, Eric replied, and because something about this whole situation feels wrong. Kravax is too valuable a commander to just throw away over one defeat. Jones studied the data on his screen. What are you looking for exactly? Loopholes, exceptions, anything in their culture that might give Kravax a way out. And if you find nothing? Eric didn't answer. Instead, he scrolled through another text on Zithari battle rituals. Suddenly he stopped, his finger hovering over a passage. Wait, What's this? He leaned forward, reading intently. The right of honor transfer. Jones looked over his shoulder. What does it mean? It's ancient, barely practiced anymore according to this text. But it says that a warrior of equal or greater rank can claim responsibility for another's defeat, if they can prove superior tactics were the deciding factor, not the other warrior's failure. Eric stood up suddenly. This could work. How? You're not a Zithari warrior, but I am a commander of equal rank who defeated her through superior tactics. His mind raced with possibilities. The text doesn't specify the warrior has to be Zithari, just that they must be of equal standing. Jones looked skeptical. Sir, even if this ritual is real, do you think they'll accept a human invoking it? They have to at least consider it. Their whole culture is built on ritual and tradition. Eric gathered the data pads. I need to speak with Kravax immediately. Meanwhile, in her cell, Kravax sat in meditation. She had made peace with her fate, or so she told herself. Yet something troubled her. Not fear of death, but doubts about the empire she had served so faithfully. During her captivity, she had observed the humans closely. Their ship ran efficiently despite their more relaxed command structure. Officers spoke freely, offering opinions that would never be tolerated on a Zithari vessel. Yet somehow this openness seemed to strengthen them rather than weaken them. And Captain Summers, he was most puzzling of all. A capable warrior who had defeated her, yet he showed concern for her fate. Such behavior made no sense in the Zithari worldview. The door to her cell opened and Eric entered, his face animated with excitement. The right of honor transfer, he said without preamble. Tell me about it. Kravax's eyes widened slightly. How do you know of this? I've been researching your culture. Is it real? Could it work? She stood slowly. It is real, but rarely invoked. A relic from our early days of empire, but you cannot. Why not? I defeated you. I can claim it was my superior tactics, not your failure. The texts don't specify the challenger must be Zithari, because no outsider has ever invoked our sacred rituals, she said, her voice hushed. It would be unprecedented, but not forbidden. Kravax studied him carefully. No, not explicitly forbidden. She paused. You would do this? Risk challenging a Zithari arbiter for an enemy commander? Eric met her gaze steadily. I would. For the first time since her capture, Kravax felt something she had thought long extinguished. Hope. But with it came confusion. Why, Captain? Why save the life of an enemy? Eric's answer was simple. Because sometimes enemies can become allies, and because executing good commanders is a waste, no matter whose side they're on. The ship's comm system interrupted them. Captain to the bridge. The Zithari are requesting final confirmation of exchange protocols. The time had come. The gambit would either work or fail spectacularly. The exchange was set to take place in Cargo Bay 3. The large space had been cleared of containers, leaving an open area where both parties could meet. On one side stood the Zithari delegation, Arbiter, Sekfor and his two warriors, their posture rigid and formal. On the other side, Eric had positioned a small security team led by Chief West. The door opened. Kravax entered, escorted by Lieutenant Jones. Though her hands were bound, she walked with the dignity of a commander, her head held high. She wore her damaged uniform, refusing the offer of fresh clothes. The battle marks were her final badge of honor. Commander Kravax, Arbiter Sekfor said, his voice echoing in the large room. You stand accused of failure in battle, bringing dishonor to the Empire and your clan. Do you accept the judgment that awaits you? Before Kravax could answer, Eric stepped forward. Arbiter Sekfor, I invoke the right of honor transfer. The words fell like stones in still water. The Zithari warriors tensed, hands moving toward their ceremonial weapons. Sekfor's eyes narrowed to slits. What did you say, human? The Arbiter's voice was dangerous, barely controlled. I invoke the right of honor transfer, Eric repeated clearly. As the commander who defeated Kravax in battle, I claim that her defeat was due to my superior tactics, not any failure on her part. A shocked silence filled the cargo bay. Even the human security team exchanged confused glances. "This is outrageous," Sec4 hissed. "You dare invoke our sacred traditions? You are not Zithari." Eric stood his ground. "Your ancient texts don't specify that the challenger must be Zithari, only that they must be the victorious commander. I qualify." Sec4 turned to Kravax. "Did you put him up to this mockery?" "I did not," Kravax answered truthfully. "This was Captain Summers' decision alone." The Arbiter circled Eric slowly, studying him. "You understand what you're doing, human? This is not some diplomatic trick. The rite has sacred meaning." "I understand completely," Eric said. "I've studied the ritual. I'm prepared to demonstrate how my tactics overcame Commander Kravax's, proving that the fault lies not in her abilities but in my counter-strategy." The Zithari warriors looked to their Arbiter, clearly uncertain how to proceed. This situation had never occurred in their history. Sec4's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of deep thought among his kind. "The High Command will need to be consulted. This is unprecedented." "While you consult them," Eric said, "Commander, Kravax remains under my protection. The exchange of other prisoners can proceed as planned." Lieutenant Jones stepped closer to Eric. "Captain, are you sure about this?" she whispered. "If they agree to the ritual, you're bound by their rules." Eric gave a slight nod but kept his eyes on the Arbiter. This was the gamble, forcing the Zithari to either accept his challenge or openly break with their own traditions. Either way, it bought time. Sec4 finally spoke. "Very well, Captain Summers. I will consult with High Command. Until then, the prisoner exchange is suspended." He turned to leave, then paused. "But know this. If the right is granted, you place yourself under Zithari law. Failure could mean your own execution rather than hers." After the Zithari delegation left, Eric turned to Kravax. Her golden eyes studied him with new intensity. "You have created quite a situation, Captain," she said quietly. "They will not take this lightly." "I'm counting on it," Eric replied. "Their adherence to tradition is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. And if they accept your challenge, what then?" Eric smiled slightly. "Then I prove what I already know, that you didn't fail. You were simply outmatched by an opponent who had studied your tactics extensively." For the first time since her capture, Kravax's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "You are either the bravest human I have met," she said, "or the most foolish." "Sometimes," Eric replied. "There's not much difference between the two." 6 hours passed before the Zithari returned. Eric spent the time in his ready room, reviewing battle records while Kravax remained under guard in a nearby conference room. When the call finally came, Eric felt a mix of relief and anxiety. "They've made their decision," Lieutenant Jones reported from the doorway. "The same cargo bay, the same players." But now the energy was different. 4 more Zithari had joined the delegation, including a battle recorder, a living historian who would document whatever happened next. Arbiter Sec4 stood in the center of the room, his formal armor now adorned with ceremonial markings. "Captain Eric Summers of Earth Forces," he began, his voice carrying the weight of official proclamation. "The High Command has reviewed your unprecedented request. After much deliberation, they have decided to grant the right of honor transfer." Murmurs spread among the human crew. Eric maintained his composure, though inside he felt a surge of victory. "However," Sec4 continued, "there are conditions. The rite must be performed according to ancient tradition. You must demonstrate with precision how your tactics overcame Commander Kravax's. Any failure will result in rejection of your claim." "I understand and accept," Eric said formally. Kravax was brought forward, her restraints removed. She stood, straight, her expression carefully neutral, though Eric caught a flash of something in her eyes. Perhaps hope, perhaps fear. The battle recorder stepped forward, carrying a small device that projected a 3-dimensional map of the Proxima Ridge. "Battlefield. Begin," he instructed Eric. For the next 30 minutes, Eric meticulously walked through the battle, explaining each decision, each maneuver. He showed how he had studied Kravax's previous engagements, identifying patterns in her tactics. "Commander, Kravax's approach was textbook perfect," Eric explained, manipulating the holographic ships. "Her deployment here and here, flawless by conventional standards. But I specifically designed our formation to counter her known strategies." The Zithari observers watched intently, occasionally conferring in low voices. Kravax herself studied the replay of her defeat, her face showing grudging appreciation for the human's insight. The defeat was not due to Commander Kravax's failure, Eric concluded, but rather my force's specific preparation to counter her particular style of command. Against any other opponent, her tactics would likely have succeeded. A silence fell over the cargo bay as the battle recorder shut down the projection. Arbiter Sekfor stepped forward again. "The demonstration is complete," he announced. "By the ancient laws of the right, I must now render judgment." Everyone held their breath. Eric met Kravax's eyes briefly across the room. "The claim of honor, transfer is accepted," Sekfor declared. "Commander Kravax's defeat is attributed to Captain Summers's superior preparation, not her failure of command." Relief washed over Eric. He had done it. "However," Sekfor continued, "while her life is spared, she cannot return to her former position. A commander who has been subject to honor transfer cannot lead Imperial forces again. She is exiled from the Empire, stripped of her clan name and rights." The victory suddenly felt hollow. Eric looked at Kravax, whose face remained impassive though her hands trembled slightly. "Is that your final word?" Eric asked. "It is the law," Sekfor replied simply. "She lives, but not as one of us." He turned to Kravax. "You have until the rising of Homeworld's third moon to remove all Imperial markings from your person. You are no longer Zithari." With those cold words, the Arbiter signaled to his warriors. Without another glance at Kravax, they departed the cargo bay, returning to their ship. When they were gone, Kravax slowly sank to one knee, her composure finally breaking. "I am nothing now," she whispered. Eric approached her cautiously. "You're alive and you're free." She looked up at him, her golden eyes filled with confusion. "Free to do what, Captain? My entire existence was the Empire." "To choose your own path," Eric said, offering his hand to help her rise, "starting with helping us understand the Crimson Tide offensive." Kravax stared at his extended hand for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and took it. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "there is honor in saving lives rather than taking them." It was a beginning. The USS Horizon moved through space at maximum speed. On the bridge, tension hung in the air. 3 weeks had passed since Kravax's exile, and now they raced toward a confrontation that would determine the future of human-Zithari relations. "Status report," Eric called from the captain's chair. "Allied fleet is in position, Captain," Lieutenant Jones replied. "All ships report ready." Eric nodded. "And the Zithari?" "The Crimson Tide formation is advancing exactly as predicted," the tactical officer reported. 300 ships, just as Commander Kravax indicated. At a side console, Kravax studied the tactical display. She wore a modified human uniform now, the purple scales of her face contrasting with the dark blue fabric. The past weeks had transformed her from prisoner to advisor, though some of the crew still viewed her with suspicion. "They're following the primary attack pattern," she confirmed. "The flagship will be here." She pointed to a position just behind the front line. "Admiral Vexcor values security over glory." Eric moved to stand beside her. "Your intel has been perfect so far. You're sure this will work?" "As sure as one can be in war," Kravax replied. "The plan targets their formation weaknesses without seeking total destruction. It offers them an honorable retreat." The plan they had developed was unique, a blend of human adaptability and Zithari understanding. Rather than aiming for maximum casualties, they would create a tactical situation that forced the Zithari to withdraw without losing face. A path to peace through strength. "All ships, move to position Alpha," Eric ordered. "Prepare to execute Operation Skybridge on my mark." The human fleet spread out in a formation that would have appeared chaotic to most observers. but it had been carefully designed with Kravax's help to counter the rigid Zithari battle doctrine. "They're within range," Jones reported. "Receiving. Transmission from the Zithari flagship." "On screen," Eric commanded. Admiral Vexcor's face appeared, his scales darker than Kravax's, his eyes cold. "Human forces, this is your only warning. Surrender your worlds or be destroyed." Eric stepped forward. "Admiral, we offer an alternative. Withdraw your forces and we will begin peace negotiations." The Zithari admiral sneered. "Peace? The Empire does not negotiate with—" His eyes widened as he spotted Kravax standing behind Eric. "The traitor lives and wears your colors." "I serve life now, Admiral," Kravax said steadily, "not death." "You shame all Zithari," Vexcor spat. "Perhaps," she replied calmly, "or perhaps I see what you cannot." The transmission cut abruptly. Seconds later, the massive Zithari fleet began its advance. "They're moving into attack formation," Jones reported. "All ships report energy weapons charging." Eric returned to his chair. "Execute Operation Skybridge, now." What followed was unlike any battle in the war so far. The human ships moved in seemingly random patterns that nonetheless formed a coherent strategy. They targeted specific weaknesses in the Zithari formation, disrupting their carefully planned attack sequences without directly engaging their strongest vessels. Kravax watched with mixed emotions as her strategy unfolded. This was her knowledge being used against her former people, yet in a way that would minimize deaths on both sides. 2 hours later, the battle reached its turning point. The Zithari formation had been split into 3 isolated groups, their coordination broken, yet most of their ships remained intact. "They're reassessing," Kravax observed. "Admiral Vexcor must now choose between pressing a losing battle or withdrawing to preserve his forces." As if on cue, the Zithari flagship began to move, turning away from the engagement. "They're retreating," Jones confirmed, disbelief in her voice. "All Zithari vessels are disengaging." A cheer went up on the bridge. Eric remained focused, watching the tactical display until he was certain it wasn't a feint. Then he turned to Kravax. "You did it," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We did it. I provided knowledge, but you saw possibilities I never could." "Incoming transmission," the communications officer called. "It's Admiral Vexcor again." The Zithari admiral's face appeared, his expression tight with controlled anger. "This battle is yours, Captain Summers. But the war can end here." Eric interrupted. "You've seen what we can do together. Imagine what our peoples might accomplish in peace." A long silence followed. Finally, Vexcor spoke. "The High Command will consider your offer of negotiations." After the transmission ended, Eric ordered the fleet to stand down from battle stations. As the tension on the bridge eased, he found Kravax staring out at the stars. "What will you do now?" he asked her. "I am neither fully human nor Zithari anymore," she replied thoughtfully. "Perhaps I belong between our worlds. A bridge, like your operation's name." Eric smiled. "We'll need such bridges in the days ahead." Kravax turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his. "Once I would have died for failure. Instead, you showed me another path. Perhaps our peoples can find one too." Outside, the stars continued their eternal watch as 2 civilizations took their first tentative steps toward understanding, all because an enemy had stepped in where tradition demanded death.